192 regarding shaving and the N95 mask. Some N95 masks require people to shave because otherwise it's not enough of a tight fit. It's not, the N95 is not recommended for most people, but it's used by medical personnel when they're treating patients with COVID-19. Is a Jew who does not usually shave due to religious reasons, or who would not shave during periods such as Sphira or the 3 weeks, would he be permitted to shave in order to wear these tight-fitting masks? Rav Asher Weiss addressed this question in the second edition of Minchas Osher concerning corona-related issues. He rules that it's permitted. I was given a question by somebody who has a job at the hospital. And he's appointed to deal with sick corona patients. The experts say, if he has a beard, the protection by the mask will not close enough on his face, so it'll be hermetically sealed. There's a chance that he could get sick of COVID. On the other hand, this is maybe a Hasidic guy who's never shaved his beard ever. There are Hasidim that have a beard from the time that they were already bar mitzvah. So first of all, Rav Asher Weiss gives us a very good insight into this whole issue of beards. He says the inner issue of beards is just a midas chasidus. As long as you don't use a straight blade, there's no prohibition to shave your beard. There were gedolim who shaved their beards. Even a Kabbalist, the Rama Mipano. The aim is no one should think that there's an Aveira to shave your beard. The Zohar talks about a certain Maila by having a holy beard. And the Kach Lefidasa Ari in Tamei HaMitzvos Perek Kedoshim, Roy lo Adam shelo yakor shum seyar klal nizikno, ki hein tzinorot hashefa. These are like the pipes of bracha that are being piped through. Achol ze mitzad Kabbalah, v'lo mitzad Ikar Adin. This is all Kabbalistic, and it's not Ikar Adin. V'yadati shebeshut tzemach tzedek, katav she'osam minator lizkalech b'misparayim ke'ein tar. He says, minator, you cannot shave even with scissors. He says that's against all the poskim. We learned this earlier on in Yoredeya, this whole sugya here, and it's permitted as long as it's not kitar. Umekevan she malat kvodo osek b'vikuach nefesh. This person who asked him the question is dealing with pikuach nefesh issues because he doesn't want to get corona. The ekev mamadoma machlaka yavshal mitzvah o shetasa yedei acherim. This mitzvah can't be done by anybody else. Zu mitzvah so zu chavos of zu chuso. He says it's his mitzvah, it's his obligation, and it's his chus for him. Just like you received reward for all those years that you did not shave your beard, you'll receive reward for shaving your beard as well. And then Rav Rimon concludes with comments about the philosophical significance of masks. He says, we merited to now leave our homes. Lirot shuva nashim, so we can see people, but ulam adayin anu atuim b'masecha, but we still have to wear masks. He says, v'chashuv lakpilakak, you should wear it. It's sometimes very hard to identify the people we're meeting. They're wearing a mask. And it's all external to really who we are. Even when we're not wearing an external mask, we have sort of internal masks, ways of hiding our real selves. Ziyuf pnimi, like counterfeit and internal counterfeit. Nispalel be'eretz Hashem shebekorv te'atzra magefa, tusra masecha, that the pandemic will stop. We'll be able to remove our masks. V'nuchal gam b'tzura pnimit lasir masechot she'enan mechonot, to remove our internal masks. Gam klape pnei adam, that the masks that we wear as we meet other people, and any mask that we have to Hashem, but I klape Hashem, the entirely beinu love the be'emet. Okay, page 201. These are different halachot regarding Corona that are connected to Shabbos. A number of halachic issues have arisen within the context of Hilchos Shabbos. Some are more relevant during the initial period of the spread. Others are still presently relevant. Some are relevant to everyone. Others are relevant for specific people like doctors and nurses. But the common denominator among all of them is that they all relate to the question of applying the unchanging principle of halacha to novel and challenging situations, even when many other aspects of daily life are being transformed. What about using hand sanitizers on Shabbos? One of the most prevalent practices over the past few months has been the constant washing of hands with soap and applying hand sanitizer at frequent intervals. Is it permitted to use hand sanitizers such as Purell or Alkogel, I guess, which is the name of one of these things in Israel, on Shabbat? Let us first briefly review the halachic status of liquid and soap and apply the principles to the question of sanitizer. The Gemara in Shabbos records a dispute whether certain materials such as oil, like olive oil, are included within the prohibition of memareach, smoothing a pliable substance on top of a solid surface. Memareach is included in the malach of memachek, smoothing out a more solid-like material on top of another surface. The same halachic issue arises in the context of using toothpaste or body cream on Shabbos. Although the standard case of mimarech applies to slightly thicker materials, such as wax, according to Rav, it applies to smoothing thick oil upon another surface as well. Right? Mishcha, what about oil? Rav Asar u'Shmuel Shari. Rav prohibited to rub it on, and Shmuel permitted it. Manda Asar, Ravu prohibited. Gazrina Mishum Shava. It's a gzeira that if you did it to this, you might think it's permitted with wax. Manda Shari lo Gazri. Shmuel is not goizer. But the Shulchan Aruch, when he brings the halacha psuka, he paskins like Rav. Also, litain shava or shemen av. You can't use wax or thick oil. Benekav achavis. Let's say you have a barrel and there's a hole in it, it's leaking fluid. You can't rub either wax or thick oil there, l'satmo, to seal it up. So even according to Shulchan Aruch, though, only thick oil would be subject to memareach, but thin oil, such as that sold in stores, would be entirely permitted. And the Mishnah Berurah spells this out, that af agav de miruach b'shemen aser, really anointing with like olive oil is not aser. Because the whole isser is because we make exer because of wax. But the only kind of oil with thick oil, you might switch it with wax. But regular oil, like oil that you buy in the store for cooking oil or something like that, olive oil, that would not have a problem to anoint, to put something like that on your body. Based on this, it would seem that any liquid soap may be used on Shabbos without a problem. And this is the common practice and is recorded in Shmir Shabbos Kilchasa. Ein lirchotz b'sabon, you cannot wash with soap, but that's b'sabon kasher. Hein b'sabon rach. Aval mutar lishtamesh b'sabon nazil. If it's liquid soap, that you can use. The Shmir Shabbos explains that in addition to being possibly forbidden due to Moreach, it may also be forbidden to the depression of molid, creating a new form, since the solid soap is transformed into liquid when rubbing on one's hands. So liquid soap you can use, but this is a famous machlokas between Rav Shlomo Zalman, who is usually the gadol that Rav Neuvert, who is the author of Shmir Shabbos Kilchasa, relied on. Rav Moshe Feinstein took a more stringent stand than most poskim regarding using liquid soap on Shabbos.
Bernie, how do you describe a thick oil?
So hang on, very good, Chaim. We're gonna go into the viscosity, and there's ways to measure the viscosity, and that will be how we will determine. And we're gonna see other sort of experiments that we're given to do something to the liquid for us to decide whether or not it's thick or thin.
Great.
Very good point, and we'll go through that. So first, let's see the concern of Rav Moshe regarding liquid soap. V'af beburish shehu lach kamayim. It's very clear that Rav Moshe is talking about liquid soap. Af sheharbei noagim latir, even though he recognizes that there were rabbanim who were matir, he says ein borer li kol kach heter. He says it's not that clear to me why there should be a heter. Mikivan shenaseh mizeh hamolinis, which is like a lather. It sort of spreads a lather. So there's still a little bit of this spreading. It's not like water or oil. Even though there's no prohibition on machek, he says he didn't rely on this heter in his house. He says it's going to be machmir.
I have a very clear recollection of sitting in front of Rav Moshe, and people brought him over liquids, and he would pour the liquid and rub it in his hand, and actually watch it pour on his hand and see how it spread. And I remember him saying, "This is okay. This is not okay." I had no idea what it was, but that's so he clearly thought that some of it was okay if it was very thin, and he would watch how it spread on his hand. So that I clearly remember, and
I love it. Yeah. That's fantastic. And we're going to see in the next couple of pages some of the things that maybe Rav Moshe relied on when he was testing those things. So even if we follow the more accepted lenient approach concerning soap, we still need to determine whether all liquid soaps or sanitizers qualify as liquids. Rav Eliakim Levanon, who is the rabbi in Elon Moreh, presents the basic guidelines in response to a question from the beginning of the spread of COVID, that it depends upon whether the properties are more like a liquid or solid. Sheila, ayem mutar lishtamesh ba'alcohol gel b'Shabbos. Alcohol gel is this liquid soap in Israel. Tshuva. Haklal b'shimush b'tachshirim me'ein elu. The issues of using these kind of things, im hatachshir nozli, if it's liquid and it spills, nishpach, kasher hofchim et hakli, when you turn the kli over and it spills. Oh, im menechim al mishtach b'shupa, if you drip it on an incline and hu yored, and it goes down, so nozel tachtita mishtach, and it drips down to the bottom of the incline. Mutar limrachat hayad ochel guf acher b'Shabbos. That would be a liquid that you could be permitted to put on for Shabbos. Im kasher metaftefim oto al mishtach meshupa hu nishtar maybe. But let's say you drop this liquid on an incline and it just sits there and doesn't move. So then osir b'shimush b'Shabbos. Now he says mutar l'dalalo al yedei mayim b'chadom b'Shabbos. Something that is now thick, you can dilute it with water so that it does become more liquidy, and then it would be permitted to be used on Shabbos. As mutar b'shimush. So you can dilute something that you think is too thick. Rav David Hebrew of the Star K suggests that it may depend on the level of viscosity, which is the property of resistance to a flow of a fluid, measured in CPs, centipoise, of the soap and offers a very detailed breakdown of exactly which types of soaps would be permitted on Shabbos and which were forbidden. In the opinion of the Star K, only fluids that have a CP of less than 600 would be permitted to use on Shabbos. Though Rav Heber also notes that it's permitted to dilute it if it's needed. So solids and ointments, one may not smear cream or ointment or use bar soap, stick deodorant, or toothpaste on Shabbos. Similarly, one may not apply lipstick on Shabbos. This is true even if the lipstick is applied lightly. Then viscous fluids, thick oils, and creamy hand soaps that are viscous and pour slowly are also subject to the prohibition. For example, soft soap, liquid hand soap may not be used on Shabbos due to its thickness. But fluids with low viscosity, oils that pour faster with a viscosity of 600 CP or less, are not subject to this prohibition. The Star K tested Ultra Dawn concentrated dish liquid or antibacterial hand soap at room temperature and determined that it's permissible to use on Shabbos. Regular liquid dishwashing soap may also be used. Liquid deodorant in roll-on or spray form may also be used on Shabbos. And what about diluting thicker fluids? One may use a dilute fluid if the viscosity of the diluted product is 600 CP or less. For example, soft soap, antibacterial liquid hand soap with light moisturizer that is diluted 1 part water into 2 parts soap is permissible for use on Shabbos. So most liquid hand soaps, as well as sanitizers, have a viscosity less than 600 CP. According to this approach, then, it would seem that most hand sanitizers would be permitted to use on Shabbos. And this is the approach taken by many poskim, as well as Rav Gedalia Schwartz, who's the Rosh Bezdin in Chicago. Rav Schwartz said that using a hand sanitizer such as Purell on Shabbos and Yom Tov is no different than using liquid soap. He says Igros Moshe holds that it's not permissible, but many poskim hold that it is permitted. And again, we quote the Shmir Shabbos, so we see the main two halachic antagonists in this sugya.
Rav Gedalia Schwartz passed away a couple months ago. Lev Shalom.
Right. Rav Schwartz accepts this latter approach. Hand sanitizers and hand soaps contain fragrances which do impart a pleasant smell to the person's hand, but Rav Schwartz said that most poskim follow Chacham Tzvi, who argues on Taz and holds this doesn't pose a concern. Okay? Rav Asher Bush cites Rav Herschel Schechter as taking the same approach. Hand sanitizers come in various forms, including gels and liquids. Based on the Shulchan Aruch, Rav Herschel Schechter has pointed out that applying olive oil or other substances of the same viscosity are permitted. Accordingly, the liquid forms generally sprayed on are clearly permitted on Shabbos. Following the CDC guidelines, one needs to make sure that the entire hand, top and bottom, and between the fingers has been properly covered with the soap. However, Rav Yitzchak Mordechai Rubin, rabbi of the Bnei Torah Shul in Har Nof, and the author of the Sefer Orcha Shabbos on Hilchos Shabbos, points out that some sanitizers are more similar to gels in their form and are forbidden to use. Binyan hashimush benozel chitu hamechuneh alkogel b'Shabbos yesh lavchin ben sugim shonim. You have to differentiate between different types shel mutzar zeh of this product. Imusarich ba'ofen she'enu nishpach also Shabbos. If it's thick that it doesn't spill like a liquid, it's forbidden to use on Shabbos. V'emu nozli, but if it's liquid, so that when you pour it, shekasher marim lo tomei habakbuk, when yishpach al hayadayim, it immediately splashes on your hands. Mutter lishtamish bo b'Shabbos. Tam yisra shimush ba'alcohol gel, she'einu nozli. He says alcohol is prohibited because it's not liquid enough. The next shav k'mo shemenav, it's like thick oil. Shegazer b'atu she'yav l'marech shav, like we learned, that gzeira, where it might be like wax, is certainly a problem. If it's liquid like olive oil, then it shouldn't be a problem. The doctors say that using alcohol isn't dafka the only thing to use. As long as you use a liquid soap, that would disinfect for this purpose. If one has one of the thicker sanitizers that presents a halachic problem to use on Shabbos, is there some permitted way to use it? or you have to purchase a permitted one. So one suggestion already mentioned by Rav Vanon is that you can dilute a thicker gel and transform it into a more liquid form. And other poskim agree with this. Another potential ground for leniency is based on a ruling of the Mogen Avram and Mishnah Berurah. They suggest that the prohibition of a mamarech does not apply to rubbing a cream or gel on one's skin if one rubs it in entirely into the skin such that it is totally absorbed and no longer visible. So we know, think about zinc oxide. We used to put that on our nose if someone had a certain sensitivity. So, but that you would see the white covering remained on the person's nose. Or other things that you put on that are meant to stay there in the form that you put it. As opposed, what they're saying here is if you take something and you rub it in, so you don't see it anymore. So there's a sheet of the Mogen Avram that says that's not the memareach is when you smooth wax on something and the wax is supposed to stay there. But if you take a cream and rub it into your skin so you don't see the cream anymore, then that might not be problematic.
Based on what you're saying, that would apply to underarm deodorant as well, since it's not visible to anybody else.
Well, no, it's not a matter of visible to somebody else. It's a matter of if you see it, Bernie, in the location that you put it on, that would be problematic. But we said already deodorant that comes out through a spray is not a problem. We said that's liquid.
The roll-on gels, or the ones that you have gel coming out the top and you apply it to the skin. Generally, it gets absorbed very quickly.
I know we mentioned.
Yeah, I see it's prohibited. That's according to Rav Haber. Stick deodorant.
Yeah. Okay, but let's just learn this kula of the Mogen Avram. The marech lo shayach ela kishkavanoso shiyit marech dover al gav chaver avalocha rotza shivla bekarka. That means if you're going to put the material on something else and you meant it to stay there, that's the malach of the mareach. But here, you don't want it to stay there. It's going to be absorbed. And this ruling is applied by Rav Neuwirth in the Shmir Shabbos to cases of rubbing creams into one's skin as well. He cites Rav Shlomo Zalman as being lenient if the cream is entirely absorbed. He raises other problems that we will discuss. Ein bedas Torah, shemedayik miloshna Mogen Avram, shegam mishcha muter limroch, that a cream can be spread al kolpanim b'choyle shein b'sakana. He says at least it should be a chola shein b'sakana. Hechad the kavanosu lavliya b'sachabosar, if the cream is going to be absorbed into the skin. V'lochor yesh lahakshus salam. But you can question this. Umagar Rav Shlomo Zalman Shamati dim marechas hamishchat shekula nimsa v'nivlas leguf. If you spread this cream, so it's completely absorbed. Lo mikrim marech. It's not called marech. V'lo aser ela kashamishcha nisheret. If it stays where it is, v'rotzelach lika al pi haguf. Right, you're smoothing this thing on top of your body. You want it to stay there. That's memarech in a problematic way. So I think it's very clear that when we rub a gel on our hands, it's rubbed so that you absorb it. It's not meant to stay there. It's not meant to be a coating of something. So based on this kula of the Mogen Avram, that would certainly be a leniency. And Rav Herschel Schechter implies this leniency to hand sanitizers as well as Purell. The gel raises the question of L'Locha B'Mareach. It should be noted that many, if not most, of the products labeled as gel are in fact a liquid that pours, not thicker in consistency than olive oil, and are not subject to the prohibition of Mareach. Those products, which may be a true gel, and which have a noticeable thicker consistency, so then we have a concern. However, it's important to note that the Mogen Avram, in Orach Chaim 3:16, quoted by the Mishnah Berurah, there, ruled that a thicker substance, if it's obliterated, i.e. it's rubbed into the skin so it does not leave a coating, is not subject to the prohibition of Mareach. This ruling is also applied by Rav Ovadia Yosef and Yabia Omer regarding the use of toothpaste, because also toothpaste doesn't remain as a layer meant to stay there on the teeth. And a more universal way by Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, who ruled that rubbing in the ointment until it is totally melted and absorbed into a person's skin is not considered marech, as the prohibition is only when the ointment remains and one wants to leave a layer on the surface of his body. Accordingly, if a gel is thin and easily poured, it is viewed by the halach as a liquid and may be applied without any hesitation. In cases where there is fear of communicable disease and neither a liquid nor a thin gel is available, you only have a thick gel, there is certainly room to permit the use of hand sanitizer, provided one was careful to fully rub it into the skin until it was no longer noticeable. And we have the other heter that you can dilute it with some water before you rub it so that it becomes more liquidy. So we've seen already two heterim today if you're stuck with a gel that you think is too thick. So there's ample room to be lenient to apply soaps and sanitizer on Shabbos in this situation, which of course should be strongly encouraged. Any comments?
I think in regard to what Dr. Mander was saying, the permission is for liquid deodorant and roll-on, which is on page 203, 7, paragraph 7, number 3. I think you may have been talking about like a stick where it's actually it's not a liquid, but you actually roll the stick. That is probably pure mamache because you're actually smoothing out the stick, as opposed to liquid roll-on, which I think is the basis that Rabbi Heber says is
right.
permitted.
Right.
Yeah.
He says liquid deodorant in roll-on or spray form. Right. And I'm concerned that the other one actually leaves a mark there, which would be problematic.
The other one, you're actually smoothing out the stick. It's probably just purely mamachek. It's probably clear mamachek, not even marech, because you're smoothing out the stick as opposed to a liquid roll-on where you're not smoothing out anything. It's just the liquid comes out and you roll it on, which is permitted.
Right there, you're saying we're normally here. We've been worrying about mamachek on our skin. There, you're actually doing mamachek the item itself.
Exactly. Right. Yeah.
Okay, let's go to 207. Use of thermometers on Shabbos in public places. That's an interesting. Another question has arisen: is the permissibility of measuring people's temperature on Shabbos using kinds of digital thermometers that need not be touching the person being checked? This device has been used in some public settings recently in Israel to measure people's temperature upon entry, since fever is one of the signs that one is infected with COVID. Is it permitted for one to enter locations where a temperature check will be performed? Is it permitted for shuls to institute this practice on Shabbos? Well, I hope someone at our shul learned this sugya because we've been doing it in our shul. But I think we will become aware of exactly why the person who does it very soon. By the way, in my hospital now, they don't measure temperature when we walk into the hospital. They've stopped doing it. The primary halachic issue involved is using an electronic device on Shabbos. Now, we will discuss this subject of electricity and electronic devices on Shabbos at length when we learn Hilchos Shabbos, God willing, which is coming up because the next chelek of Shulchan Aruch we're going to be learning, God willing, is Orach Chaim, and the Hilchos of Shabbos appear in Orach Chaim. But for now, we can suffice by noting that according to most poskim, except for the Chazon Ish, operating electronic items with LED screens or the like is generally treated not as a doraisa, but as a rabbinic prohibition. If that is the case, then there should be room to allow a Gentile to operate a thermometer gun on Shabbos. This is an important principle for all of us to know, since the Shulchan Aruch allows Amira La'akum, instructing a Gentile to violate a prohibition in case of need or illness, when the prohibition is only rabbinic, right? Amira La'akum, we can't tell a non-Jew to do something that for us is forbidden midoraisa. That's Amira La'akum. We also cannot tell an Eino Yehudi to do something for us that is prohibited rabbinically, except if it's L'tzorach Tzibur, if it's L'tzorach Mitzvah, or it's some tzorach like for chola, even she'ein bo sakana. So you can't just do it, But for example, sometimes you would see at Young Israel Hancock Park, they would call the Eino Yehudi in to adjust the air conditioning on Shabbos. Well, that's for the tzibur. Somebody was hot, it's for Shabbos, it's for davening, it's for the tzibur. Means it's not stam. You're allowed to do it had to be rabbinic. It cannot be deraisa, unless, of course, that they're gedorim for that. Let's see what the Shulchan Aruch says. Davar sheina malacha.
Yeah, but this is also tzibur. I mean, it's bichlal tzibur here also.
Yeah, no. So I'm saying, I'm saying, we're gonna here. You're allowed to tell a Gentile to violate a rabbinic prohibition when there's a tzorech.
Yeah, but the tzorech is double over here. It's a tzorech of refuah, of whatever.
There's plenty of tzorech. There's not going to be any question about tzorech. Let's just see the language of the Shulchan Aruch. Davar sheina malacha, something that is not prohibited midoraisa. The eina asur lasos b'Shabbos ela mishum shvus. The only reason we can't do it is because the Rabbanon made a prohibition about it. But mili midoraisa, it's not a malacha. Mutul Yisrael lomar le'eina Yehudi lasotu b'Shabbos v'hu sheyesham miktzas choili. Right? There's got to be some illness. Oyet tzorech l'dover tzorech. Oyet tzorech l'dover tzorech harbe. There's a great need for it. O mipnei mitzvah. So davening in shul is a mitzvah. Right? Keitzad. Omer Yisrael einu Yehudi b'Shabbos. For example, la'alos be'ilam lahavi shofar l'tokeh. You're not allowed to climb a tree on Shabbos, but that's only gzeir midrabanan. So let's say there's a shofar up in the tree. You're allowed to tell an Eino Yehudi to climb up the tree, which is only a prohibition midrabanan, to get the shofar because to help you do a mitzvah. Olavi mayim derech chotzer shelo irvu. Let's say you have a courtyard that was not in the A-roof, and you need to bring water. Let's say he's not a choilish yesh bo sakona. He's got a headache and he needs a moist towel. And says the Shulchan Aruch, yesh oisrin. And there are those who usher in this case. This ruling has been given recently as well by Rav Willig. With shuls now operating sooner than later, can we use thermometers to check people coming into shul on Shabbos and Yom Tov? And
what's the case of the goy going up in the tree? You don't blow shofar on Shabbos anyways.
no, on Yom Tov. On Yom Tov.
It says Shabbos here. Shabbos.
We don't blow shofar on Shabbos.
Yeah, so
I don't know what he wanted.
what's he saying?
It could be that you need it for the next day, and he's only there then. I mean, it has
No, but then you can do it the next day.
And you do it the
He's
next
not
day.
gonna be there the next day.
Less.
He may not
No,
be
but
there.
it's the same thing because you're not allowed to climb a tree on Yom Tov either. The shvus of climbing a tree exists by Yom. I mean, I learned that it was relating to Yom Tov itself. Well, let's say the second day of Rosh Hashanah.
Okay,
I guess it's a good kasha on the Shulchan Aruch there.
okay.
Look it up.
Okay, good point. So the Rav Willig says it's permissible for a goy. He says there's a article where the responding rabbi also allows having a Gentile check temperatures upon entering shul if necessary. There's going to be a problem if a Jew takes the temperature. We're going to deal with that a little later on tonight. If that is not possible, Rav Willig says everyone should use a mercury one at home before coming to shul. What happens if the thermometer gun operates on an automatic setting such that whenever a person walks past it, it checks the person's temperature automatically? In this case, the potential prohibition involved is causing numbers to appear on the screen, which could be a prohibition of kotev, writing, as presented by the Mishnah in Shabbos, which states that one is liable for writing two letters, or markings, which would include writing numbers. If you write two letters, whether you're right-handed or left-handed, whether it's the same letter, two different letters, Beimishtei simonios, or let's say it's two different numbers or two different inks. And it's any kind of, doesn't have to be letters, even a marking. For example, all malachas, all malachas, the 39 malachas, had to do with building the Mishkan. So what does Ksiv have to do with the Mishkan? So the crushing, the boards that they erected would have like, I guess, numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? So that way they knew how to put the boards together, or, that they had to come this way and not the other way. So they had markings on them. So even those markings are prohibited. So the Shulchan Aruch Harav mentions explicitly that writing numbers violates the malach of koseh. Because they're dealing here, they have to get to numbers because the digital numbers that are being quote unquote written by this automatic thing is numbers. So aval kolshu tavnit ezoksav, any kind of form of writing, afilu einan oises, even not letters. El shugin l'samin ba'alma. You just it's a mark. Kagona samanim shugin lasus b'ma mispar, like numbers that recount a number. Hayreza nikra tavnik tav. If you do it in a way that you're going to violate Shabbos, it's got to be lasting, it's got to be with a certain kind of ink. So although causing numbers to appear on a screen certainly would not violate Kosev on a Doraisa level, since this is not a normal method of writing, plus the numbers remain on the screen only temporarily, it's not the Kiyum, but it may still involve Nisr Rabbanon. Now the footnote says, concerning the question of walking in front of a video camera on Shabbos and causing one's image to appear on the screen. So Rav David Bleich in Contemporary Halachic Problems, concerning the question, he just refers us to that. Concerning the question of typing on a computer screen on Shabbos, there are summaries in Jewish Action. And again, this will come up when we learn the Dinim in Orach Chaim, but you can look for those specific articles. A letter was circulated recently, signed by a number of prominent Rabbanim, including Rav Yitzchak Mordechai Rubin, Rav Shevach Rosenblatt, Rabbi of Bnei Brak, who forbade entering hospitals in Israel with such a thermometer due to the possible violations of Shabbos. If it's done manually by a Jew, then one would be causing him to violate Shabbos on one's behalf. So they wouldn't allow that. While if it's automatic, then one might be causing numbers and an image to appear on the screen. The government,
Ernie,
yes.
a couple weeks ago, it was before Mincha on a Friday night. They had that machine set up at Yavna, but I had to take my hat off for it to read. Now, if this machine is on Shabbos, is that a problem? You're actually helping the machine work.
Right. So Saul brings up a great point, which will be addressed tonight. Meaning, we're going to see that a heter is going to be given when you just walk like you would walk normally. You're going to walk into the shul. By taking your hat off, you're being Messiah. That might be a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're sure. But let's say if it's a thing where you just walk by, kederech tumo, like a regular way of walking, we're going to see that's a much better way. And taking off your hat might make it problematic. So I'm glad
a similar problem might be with all the video cameras that you see for protection outside of shuls and schools. It's all there, but it's l'tzorah pikuach nefesh because of the dangers involved with anti-Semitic acts.
So
everybody's on a video. There are video cameras inside these shuls.
The heter is not going to be pikuach nefesh. We're going to read a minchas osher tonight, where again it's kederech tumo. He's going to describe it. I mean, people are walking in Yerushalayim night and day on Shabbos, and every square inch of Yerushalayim is being videoed. But since you're walking in a normal way, you have no interest. You are being filmed, you're not being filmed. There's going to be a heter regarding that issue. So let's wait to hear how Rav Weiss puts that issue regarding this camp, because virtually the whole world today is being filmed, wherever you are. You don't realize it, but it is. That's why in that, if you remember the Boston Marathon, they had video of every little, wherever he was, they had video of it, because virtually everything is being videoed now. Okay. Let's see why these Rabbanim prohibited. B'davar medidat choma nasit l'nichlasim b'sharei batei cholim, the issue of measuring temperature when you enter into a shul, into a hospital, uv'mkomot tziburim or other public places, k'gon batei ha'aracha like hotels, yesh b'zeh chashashut isur b'locha b'Shabbos. Hein b'pu'ulot ha'elektroniot, because of the electronic actions on Matzot l'tzorch medidat hachom, because of what's required electronically to do the temperature. Ve'hein b'chtav shnotzra gabi atzag, the writing that happens on the display. V'yesh b'dover iser hein kashem medidat hachom nasit often yadani, even if the person is doing it by hand, manually by the guard standing there. Ayidei hashomer only b'pesach hamakom. V'chein b'makom sheyesh lo marechet shel matzlema, a thermal temperature meeting, hamazed kol chasim, that is monitoring everybody who comes in. And the person's image and temperature is shown on the display. He says, you're not allowed to go in. If you think you're in a life-threatening situation, you got to go to the hospital. So but they say you can't go into the hospital because you're doing bikr cholim. If you need it, l'shem sakana, then yes. They agree with using an Eino Yehudi to measure the temperature because of what we say about Amir La'akum for a rabbinic. However, Rav Yitzchak Yosef has ruled in a letter written to one of the rabbis in Hadassah that it is permitted to enter the hospital on Shabbos even in situations that do not involve pikuach nefesh. L'shelat rabim mutar kayom levaker cholim beveit cholim b'Shabbos. Can you do bikr cholim on Shabbos in a hospital that is measuring your temperature? Can you do ekev ha'matzav kiyom itkinu b'petach beit cholim marechet automatic shemoderet et chom gufo shel adam? They've set up these automatic temperature things. The madchom digitali, there's a digital measurement. Valatzag on the display near him is parachom. You can see the number that's being written there. Sheyesh ladam. If the guy has fever, they don't let him go in. So the person who comes to visit the chole, who gorem lekach, shamarechet ha'automatic pulat b'Shabbos. So this automatic machine is working on Shabbos. Umoderet lo tachom Shabbos is measuring its temperature. So is this permitted? Hatshuva. Im amad chom oved ba'ofen automati. If it's working automatically, ein b'zeh shum bai l'dat harbe poskim. There's no prohibition according to many poskim. Umutar lechatchila likanes lebeit cholim kazeh b'Shabbos k'nei levaker cholim. He says it's permitted. The kol shekei mishen achash b'tov is certainly somebody doesn't feel well. I feel ein bo sakana. Shemutar aloch lebeit cholim gam kasher modin l'tachom b'knisa. You can go to the hospital even if they measure your temperature when you go in. Avalim yesh sho'er Yehudi, but if there's a Jewish guard, shemoded b'mid chom digitali kolech v'achad, nimtza shezeh shemagil levaker chol b'Shabbos, gorem lekach Yehudi chalo Shabbos b'shvilo. The person who's coming to visit the chol is causing the Jew who's measuring his temperature to be mechal Shabbos. Lachen boven kazeh kedai limanem lagil lebein chol. So if you know there's a Jewish guard who's doing this, you shouldn't come to the shul, to the hospital to do bikr cholim. But he says there are people who are making even when a Jew measures it. Still better to avoid a Jew violating a rabbinic prohibition. If it's done l'tzor chola, there's no prohibition. He hasn't violated anything. Then, even if the Jewish guard is doing it by hand, it's no problem. Certainly, if he's an Eino Yehudi, כמו Druze. שאלה דומה לזה נשאלה בעבר, בבניין שיש בו קומות גבוהות והתקינו בו מצלמות אבטחה באופן קבוע. He says this question was asked before with skyscrapers that have cameras installed. And it's the same thing. If you walk in, you're going to trigger the camera to picture you. So now let's learn Lamdis a little bit. So we know there's something on Shabbos called Davar Shein Miskaven. It's Machlokas Rab Shimon Rab Yehuda throughout Masechta Shabbos, that in order to violate a malach on Shabbos, you have to have kavanah to do it. So for example, let's say I have a bench in one corner and the ground and the floor is dirt. And I drag the bench from one corner to another. And I make a chritz, I make a little ditch in the floor. So my chayev for bonet. So the machlokes Rab Shimon Rab Yehuda. Rab Yehuda says you're chayev, because even Davar Shein Miskaven, you're chayev. Rab Shimon says you're potter, because my kavanah was not to make the chritz, my kavanah is to move the bench from there to there. And as long, it's not automatically going to make the chritz. It might make it, it might not make it. Now, but let's say I cut the head of a chicken off, and the blood fertilizes the ground. I can't say I didn't have kavanah to fertilize the ground. I only want to cut the chicken's head off. But you're violating. It's a psik reisha v'lo yamus. Can I cut off the head? If you have a situation where the thing is absolutely going to occur 100% of the time, even if it's a davar shein miskaven, I want to fertilize it. I don't want to cut its head off. But since by cutting its head off, you're going to kill it, you're going to be chayav for killing, for chavala. So every case of davar shein miskaven, you have to see is a davar shein miskaven. Then the question is it a psik reisha? Because by a psik reisha, even Rab Shimon will be moideh that you're chayav, except in a case where it's psik reisha v'lo nichale. Psik reisha v'lo nichale means he's not happy with the event that occurred, even though it occurred as a psik reisha. So then we'll see Rab Shimon will be matir in that situation. So with that background, let's see what he says here. So first of all, no one's doing anything with your hand. You're just walking in. You're walking in. You're not doing a dvar. Your kavod is to walk in. Now, the malach of writing is happening automatically. It's a psik reisha. The next of psik reisha. The od haisha over lo ichpit lo me'amarechet ha'otomita nimtzeit b'knisa. But the person who walks in, he doesn't care. Is it recording him? Is it not recording him? He has no interest. He has interest to walk in. So it's a case of a psik reisha of lo nichale. The kol kavonos lachnis lebeis hacholim. His kavon is to walk into the shul. Memela ze begeder psik reisha the lo nichale b'drabanan. Now, there's psik reisha where the malachas that we're talking about are d'oraisa dika malachas, but then there's a psik reisha where the malacha we're talking about is the whole malacha is only a rabbinic. So a psik reisha the lo nichale b'drabanan, das rabbim poskim lahakel b'davar. Most poskim hold that if it's a psik reisha that's not nichale by a malacha drabanan, most poskim hold that that's permitted.
Why would you say it's loy nichale? I mean, he's nichale because he wants to know what his temperature is.
No, he's not interested. When you walk in,
but he is interested. If he has temperature, he doesn't want to go in there. He shouldn't be wanting to go in there.
I would say like this, Abe. If you're going to an emergency room and you're not feeling well, so then you're interested. But here you're coming to be mavaker achola.
Yeah, but if you have temperature, you don't want to go into mavaker achola.
No, they don't want you to go in.
Oh, okay.
There's
a benefit to it.
I know, but they're learning that it's a lo nichale because you have no interest in what's in there. Yes, they're going to stop you if you have a temperature. But otherwise, if your temperature, no one talks to you if everything's normal. You walk in, are you really interested in what your temperature is when you walk in? So we'll see. If you are, then it may not be psik reisha lo nichale. That's like what Saul asked us about taking off his hat. Oh, if he takes off his hat, he really wants to know about it. So that might ruin this heter in a chanami. And what Abe is saying, maybe if the guy is really interested, it wouldn't apply here. But he wants to say that it's lo ichbeslei b'marachas ha'tumah as an instance. He doesn't want to know, he cares what the temperature is or not. V'chol kavonoso lachnis lebeis hacholim. Memela ze v'yeder psikration l'chilim v'rabbanim das rabbim poiskim l'akil b'dover. Then, listen, whenever a posek, they're always trying to mitzaref heterim. It's never enough to just have one sniff to be matir. You always want to look for a second. That's just the way it is. When they find two, they breathe a lot easier. Yesh litzaref l'zedas trumas adeshem. Shepsik reisha b'malachot rabbanon gam b'nichalei mutter. So the trumas adeshem holds that even if Abe is correct, and there's a little shtickle nichalei involved, but the trumas adeshem holds that by psikration derabanan, even if it's nichalei, it's permitted. And many achronim agreed with the trumas adeshem. Yesh harbe shecholku alav. V'nachnu toisim lahachmir b'zeh. In general, Rav Yitzchak Yosef says we're usually machmir regarding that issue. Aber b'zikration derabanan v'lo nichalei. He's walking along and has no intent or concern with being photographed or measuring his temperature. One of Rav Yosef's major points of leniency relates to psikration, performing a permitted action that causes a forbidden action to occur, but one that person does not desire or does not care about. Rav Yosef claims that many are lenient to this question when the prohibitions are a big one. It should be noted, though, that many Ashkenazi poskim are stringent about this and require two factors, two snifim, that render the situation to be an Isser Rabban in order to be lenient. This is the position of the Shar Tzion and the other poskim, and maybe part of the consideration for the stringency of Rav Rubin, Rav Rosenblatt, and the others who were stringent. We read the tshuva where they didn't want you to go into the shul, to the hospital for the Bikur Cholim. What does the Shar Tzion say? This is an Orach Chaim Shintez Zayin. Rotzelomar Mishum David Trade Rabbanon. Mishum Hachi Mutter Be'enu Mechavin. Afal Gav David Psik Reisha. So it's not enough just, no, Nichle need two rabbinic actions that are being violated. The case under discussion is where one closes a large chest and there happens to be a fly inside. So you're not allowed to hunt on Shabbos. So if you catch a fly in the chest, in a chest, when you close the chest, you might be over tzad. So according to the understanding of the Prima Godim, because trapping the fly inside is not intended, you didn't know the fly was there. You wanted to close your intent of closing it is because you don't want the clothes to get cold or whatever. You didn't know the fly was there and you had intent to hunt the fly. Number two, flies are not normally trapped. And one cannot grab the fly in a large chest in one swoop. It means if you chase a bird into a room, you're also not over tzad. It's got to be in a way that you could grab the thing in one swoop in order to be chayav for tzad. So you have two rabbinic prohibitions. That's why they just wanted to show us here that not all the Ashkenazi poskim in general are more machmir. Now, I'm going to save this tshuva of the Minchas Osher because it's really the most relevant to all the questions that have been asked tonight about walking around with video cameras and all of that. It's a beautiful tshuva, and it's 9:00, and we'll also do the next week. Can doctors drive home from Shabbos if they're called to the hospital? And can you inform me? We have a few more Hilchos Shabbos. I think next week we will also start Hilchos Zoom. Can you make a minyan with Zoom? And can you make different things via Zoom halachically? Any other comments that and we probably will next Tuesday have the shiur in my home again for those that are vaccinated and those that are comfortable in coming, and we'll have refreshments, and we will also do Zoom. So anybody who's more comfortable staying at home, or it's more convenient for them, they can stay at home as well. Whatever, it's all good. We just want to increase the enjoyment of everybody. And there's some people who specifically requested that we go back and do it personally. And those who want to sit a little further from everybody, you can do that as well. We have a big enough room here. So it's all good. Okay?
Yeah.
Sure.
I just wanted to say that I just recently saw a halachic opinion, which was an interesting question on this psikration l'onichale that comes up, and that is if by accident you leave the bulb on in your refrigerator on Shabbos, you don't have a Shabbos mode. And I saw two halachic opinions. One that on Yantif it's clearly permitted because it's the Rabbanan and psikration l'onichale, but I saw one that even on Shabbos it was permitted because it's a psikration l'onichale. You don't care about the bulb on. In fact, you'd prefer that it be off. But you're opening it and inevitably it opens. But there's a halachic opinion, respected authority. I can't remember the name. I'm going to look.
Why would it be nichale? Why wouldn't it be nichale? Because he can see what's going on in the refrigerator.
But
it may be a mamela nichale. Huh?
It's certainly lo ichbas, but even lo nichale, he doesn't want it. He'd prefer that it would be
he'd
off.
prefer that it would be off.
He doesn't want the bulb. I'd never thought about that before, but that's the opinion that I saw. So clearly on Yantif, where you have it's the Rabbanan to begin with, you can do it. But even on Shabbos, because it's psikration l'onichale, he would prefer that it be off. He just wants to open the refrigerator.
I'd just like to know who said that. So.
I'd like to
I
see
will
that.
find out and let you know, because I
Okay.
actually saw it in two places. So I will, next week, it's my homework assignment to find out.
Thank you,
Is
Yaakov.
this the same principle of walking by an automatic light? You know, some driveways have automatic lights. Is
Yes.
this the same principle?
Yes, I think it'll be covered. I think we're gonna deal more with the video cameras. The issue with the lights, we'll see. You have no kavanah to do it. If you're aware that it's gonna go on, you might want
Go around.
to you want to go away so it doesn't do it. But it's not as if you did anything willfully, etc. If it all of a sudden goes on because you were walking with derech tumo.
Ernie, the video camera question is actually not just hospitals. I think a lot of people we know, including yourself, have ring video cameras.
Right.
They're constantly, you walk up there and even a motion, they'll detect the motion and they'll start a recording that goes into Amazon. So,
But
I mean,
Chaim, that's why I said you cannot walk anywhere today in a public city and not you're being videoed wherever you are.
Yeah, but
That's
in
not
your
your own
own
house.
home, there's ring and then there's also nest. When you walk past the nest, basically that you have those thermostats nest. The nest turns itself on and turns itself off.
So this tshuva of Rav Weiss that we're going to learn next week will resolve some of these issues, or we'll learn about these issues. Some will be resolved. Maybe some we will still have questions about, but he will deal with a lot of it. He's very lenient regarding this issue, as we'll see.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay, very good, everybody. Good Shabbos,
Thank
and have a great week.
You too.
Thank you.